Hello and welcome to Say Hello to the Future of Work, sponsored by the Dell Expert Network and Intel. My name's Ed Hannan, and I'm joined today by my friend Eric Townsend, the Director of SMB Partner and MSP Marketing with Intel. And Eric, let's just get started right away with the first segment, screen to screen, which is the new face-to-face. I know that different parts of the country are in different stages with this stuff, but how did the pandemic really impact the shift to remote working?
Yeah, so I think, Ed, you bring up a good point, right? There is a shift, and I think the shift has been that there's been kind of probably three main things. One, the reliance on technology, right? Before it was like, hey, I've got my system, I have one piece of technology. Now I've got my network. Now I got to make sure I've got my accessory, my monitors. But the reliance on it all working at the same time. It's kind of like making sure it happens, right? The second part I'd say is that security has become even a bigger deal. Like most people are like, okay, security is important. Well, now it's even more important because if, let's say, you're working remotely and all of a sudden you have a problem with your system and it's got a security issue, right? So I've got my latitude right here, right? So I'm going using it. If I have a problem, how does IT actually help me with that, right? And I think that the last part that people have been talking a lot about is that we always like using the word productivity, but we also have a performance, right? And increased performance doesn't necessarily mean increased productivity. How do we make sure that we're actually enabling the productivity to be done at the edge, even though you may have the great performance, right?
Now, you make a great point, Eric, but I also want to ask you, given all that, how has the technology kept pace with the shift to remote work?
That's a good one, because I think people, when we start thinking about working in a remote environment, we still have to have a business class solutions, right? And that business class solution also means it has to be managed. So when we think about managed systems, think of your Dell Latitude, your Dell Optimizer. These are business class solutions. And being a managed one piece, but then we're going to go about security at the edge. How do we make sure that security is now not just one piece, right? It's not just that I have software. It's not just that I have services, right, from an IT perspective, but I also make sure that I've got business class security at the edge, right? So those Latitude solutions got built-in security. How do I make sure that all works together? And really, even when we're thinking about what we're working right now, a lot of people have said, hey, I can be more productive if my environment is productive. And me environment, like think of the new Dell Ultra Optiplex, right? These are ones that basically even you have like this great cool monitor, but you have the PC sitting on the back of it, and it's very clean. It makes I'm not fumbling for things, and make sure it's on. And those new form factor things are really driving productivity in this new work environment.
I think we've been in this pandemic now long enough to where the innovation cycle is really starting to incorporate a lot of the needs that sort of came up during the pandemic. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of changes going forward. So that all said, I do want to look sort of back to look forward a little bit. And the next question I have for you is, how has business face-to-face collaboration evolved over the past year?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Think about people's expectations, right? From when people first start, like, okay, hey, we can't go in the office. We're going to go home, right? And so, first one, can't wear PJs anymore. Nope, done, right? You can't. People came out with hoodies. Like right in the beginning, it was kind of like, hey, I don't do this a lot, so I'm just going to show up and I'm here at least, right? Now it's like, no, you got to look nice. I mean, you got to be Ed Hannan. You got to have like the suit coat on. You got to look good, right? And I think also people are saying, hey, the expectation of change in my virtual environment. I got to make sure it is a virtual work environment, right? This is not just an environment where, hey, like I'm just going to slap stuff together, get off the kitchen table. It's like now I got to have a real work environment. I got to have the right desk. I got to have I've got the right technology. The one thing I will point out is with all this part of making people have the opportunity to be able to work almost at all times, any times, because literally your office is just in your house, right? Or in an environment you can get to. There is more opportunity for burnout, right? So we're seeing a lot more times, okay, when we talk about having the great new technology, right? So all these Dell solutions, how do you make sure that you're enabling that so that you don't really have burnout happen to someone, that they're able to actually look at a monitor for a long time, right? Or be able to have it where they can be productive so that they can get things done faster.
It's funny, we went from looking like hackers, and I think we were all like, well, if hackers can do this stuff from home, we all can too. And then I think, to your point, I think everyone realized, I'm not sure that's the best for business. It's comfortable, but it's not best for business. So we adapt, we move forward. I think that's one of the things we've learned through the last 12 to 18 months. Next segment, we're calling it Next Level Features for Next Level Collaboration. First question, how has Intel reconfigured its technology platforms to improve the mobile computing experience?
And it's kind of been this evolution for Intel for a while, working with Dell, as far as we had the Centrino products way back in the day where we took this big desktop and put it in a small thing. And then we said, hey, I'm dating myself even couple of years ago, we had something called Ultrabook that came out. Right now, we said, look, how do we take that latitude and really make it even more innovative? And so there is a new platform called our Intel Evo Platform. This is where we take audio, graphics, and basically make it so that if I'm doing remote collaboration, that I can collaborate at a next level, and battery life's still really good, and it's actually faster than our devices that are on the market today.
There you go. Now, I want to bring in some Dell technology here as well. How are Dell laptops with the Intel vPro platform providing a next level experience that also has fewer disruptions?
Ed, it's interesting because when you talk about disruptions, right, we're in this remote environment, and even we're here today, right, people are looking at this and they're on a computer. Sometimes they're on a small screen or a big screen. Big thing we heard over and over again was, hey, how do we make sure graphics gets better? Not just graphics for today, but also in the future. So if I'm on a certain platform, how do I make it so that I come through crisply? When I'm watching a video, it comes through crisply. I think with our Intel Ears graphics, we've kind of stepped up that way. I think also what's ended up happening, the Dell Optimizer that's in the solutions that we have out there in the market today from a business perspective, they have kind of built-in AI capability. And this is where it responds to what type of applications you use. It makes sure as far as the audio that you have, I know we're going through and saying, look, how do we make it so that when you turn on an application, collaboration application, that when it shows you come up, your background is blurred, or it has the image you always use? How do we make sure it's just an automatic thing? That if all of a sudden there is something where there's a dog barking in the background, that's the noise canceling comes up automatically. The technology already there, but have it turn on seamlessly so you don't have to be the one fumbling around to turn things on.
Smart people doing smart things. That's what this is all about. Last one in this section. How are Dell laptops with the Intel vPro platform also helping employees collaborate confidently?
A couple things. I'm going to give you a little techie, Ed. I'm going to go a little techie on here for a second, right? So AV1 codecs, right? Most people don't know about codecs. This is the whole thing. It basically enables the software to work better on a specific system. So if you think about the new Latitudes or 11th Gen vPro, what happens now is that when you're using an application like this, right? Sometimes if you remember back in the day, or maybe if you have a whole system now, if someone moves, kind of they're grainy, and then all of a sudden it comes back into focus. Now we've gone through and we have the latest codecs, right? So AV1 codecs working now. So when people are moving like this, it already has you in focus. It's not having to, and the reason why is that a lot of times it's your bandwidth. So when you go through and when they're moving, if your bandwidth is only so good, it takes a while for that refresh to happen. So one, making that codecs makes you can handle on any of your backgrounds. That works, right? Second thing I'd say is that when we do have those distractions that come up, how do we make sure that we've got that noise cancellation coming in automatically? So we have something called GNA 2.0 that enables it so that comes in place right off the bat. So you don't even have to worry. All of a sudden, you're sitting there and you're in an application or you're in a meeting, and it comes up where it's like, boom, hey, there's a noise. It blocks in the background, and you're still sitting there like this. I'd also say, just from an environment perspective, everyone, Ed, has different types of monitors, right? Everyone's got different types of keyboards, things they're using. And so we've really tried to say, how do we make it so that all that can connect seamlessly? And so I would say with our integrated Thunderbolt 4 has been huge. And when we talk about connectivity, it's also not just the actual like accessories in that, but in the environment, Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi 6E, that is the latest that's come out. So it extends that capability where you can have more devices on a network, you can actually run faster. Between Thunderbolt 4 and that Wi-Fi 6E has really made it so that I can collaborate better, I can collaborate faster, and I've got, like I said, GNA 2.0 and that 81 codecs so that when I'm in my experience, it's seamless.
I think one of the things that we learned early in the pandemic, but we kept getting reminded of it throughout the pandemic, was that with networking, you really need to move way up the amount of stuff that can connect at the same time on the same network, because you kept running into traffic issues. You kept running into, like you said, bandwidth problems. You kept running into all these issues that you think would be accounted for, but I think we came to realize they probably weren't being accounted for. Is that fair? Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, Ed, it's funny. I was just talking to a partner about this, and we were just talking about the number of devices that are on a network today versus in the past. And when so I think we were bantering back and forth on this. 14 to 17, I'll just give that, the devices. So you're like, how are there 14 to 17 laptops in a house? Think about things that connect the network. So for example, security cameras. Got a couple of those, right? Let's just say, for example, you have, let's say, your desktop and a couple different notebooks, right? Let's just say, Ed, let's just say someone in your house plays video games. Just say there's two of those on the network. Then just say, let's say you have a doorbell that's got video on it. Then you start saying, okay, well, there's maybe I have appliances that have some type of an access, right? And then you start saying, okay, well, my mobile devices, like my phone, maybe gets accessed, right? There are at one time between 14 and 17 different devices hitting your network at home constantly. That's grabbing data. So that's something you said, good point. It's like, how do we make sure that what we've got, it can enable all this? And by the way, people are buying more stuff. So it's not like this, okay, that's just staying at that number. More and more devices are coming in, more and more things are out there. So this world of IoT and how it's going to impact our network remote wise is going to get bigger and bigger, more needs.
Yeah, and we did that inventory. I think it was last summer. I think,
Yeah.
Like Kindles, e-readers, like that kind of thing. Phones. And what happens is when you upgrade, I'm sure you've run into this with customers and maybe in your own life, but like when you upgrade a piece of technology, you don't necessarily disconnect the old piece of technology. Like when we bought new Kindles, it's not like we disconnected the old ones. We gave them to the kids. And when you buy a new Fitbit, Fitbit would be another thing. You buy a fitness tracker. You don't necessarily disconnect the old one. It's so that it's still looking for it. So you run down that list, and to 14 to 17. I mean, I think we came up with between 10 and 12, but I'm not sure it accounted for everything. So that number you said does not surprise me at all. Well, let's move to the next section because it kind of plays off that a little bit. We're calling it secure remote management for uncertain times, but some of this we've touched upon, but how has remote work impacted productivity?
Ed, it's interesting, right? I want to go back to what we were talking a little earlier about productivity versus performance. And I think a lot of times we think, well, if we get something that's faster, it's better performance, it's going to make sure people are more productive. And I think we have to really come to the realization that for work to get done, there is a high level of resilience that goes on right now. Meaning, sometimes, right, you could actually be working at home and your Wi-Fi goes off and your day can just be frazzled. And you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to work, right? There's resilience. If you know the word resilience, right, it means that you stretch and then you can come back. This can be also people, maybe they've got, it could be a technology thing. It could be people working at home. It could be anything. But nowadays, for people to be really productive, that thing about being not only reliant on technology, but having resilience to use it the right way throughout the day is super, super important to make sure that productivity stays up.
Resilience is a great word. It's a great word, and it really does speak to how we've sort of endured, survived, navigated, whatever verb you want to put in there, the pandemic. It's a great point. How can Dell and Intel technology solutions improve on that productivity?
So Ed, I think what we've tried to do is say, let's, Dell and Intel look a lot at technology, not just today, but also in the future. And for the last couple of years, if you think of remote work in general, it has actually been trending up, right? Because people, just from a lifestyle perspective and really kind of the gig economy we're in, how do we make sure we're supporting those people? And so we said, look, the use of remote collaboration tools is going to be used more and more. We could just see, Zoom, you could see Teams, all stuff. So how do we make sure the engagement or the experience in there can be as flawless as possible? I know it's technology flawless, but how do we make it so it's just at that next level? So we said, okay, if we can go down to the codex level, so AV1 codex, and make it so that whenever people are in an environment, it doesn't really, the bandwidth shouldn't impact their experience. So we said, if we go to the latest codex, we can make it so that we're using that technology so that if I'm moving around, right, it's going to be the same clarity, right? Even my bandwidth super high or super low. It also makes sure the battery life is actually extended. And I would say beyond that, we say, okay, that's one way we can do it. But then how do we make sure we limit distractions? So people are engaging with someone else, there's other distractions coming up. So we said with GNA 2.0, that's a technology, we said, how do we enable better noise canceling? So like I said, on the new Latitude solutions or 11 Gen V Pro, that is now not only the GNA 2.0 as far as with noise canceling, but the AV1 codex now implemented. So when you actually use different types of calibration tools, your bandwidth won't necessarily impact that.
I have to think, and I don't work for Dell or Intel or anybody else. I work for a channel company, but I have to think in an environment like this, in the last 12 to 18 months, that, ultimately every single person who works with Dell, who works with Intel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you're all beta testers for this stuff. In other words, the things that impact you as a remote worker, when it comes to all the things we've talked about today, you can offer that input into making sure that the solution that gets developed accounts for all of the things that are problems that you're dealing with. It's not like you're building something that someone else is going to use. You're building something that's ultimately going to help you and everybody else. Is that fair or unfair?
Yeah, so I'd say, even in our span of requirements gathering, we have ethnographers that go out to where people are at and say, how do they actually do things? Like, do they really use certain applications? Like, that's one piece. we also go to the software manufacturers. So Microsoft has a big one, but you can go Zoom, go to meeting lists and say, what are you guys working on right now? And how do we optimize our stuff for your solution? The last point is, okay, when we go talk to people, we say, look, tell us the problems you're having right now and how can we improve that? So I think that whole ecosystem of people, you've got your users, you got your ISVs, you got people that are literally scientists that say, how do we do this better? Those three make up that special sauce where it's like, how do we make this better? What do we do? And then we say, let's go to the technology toolbox. What can we do to meet that need? I mean, we're at great stuff right now. I think the AI technology that both Dell and Intel are putting in is going to make it better in the future.
Let's close out the section by talking real quick about how Dell laptops with the Intel vPro platform deliver that performance, but without compromising security.
Yeah, and security, right? The big elephant in the room, right? And I think there's a balance between making things secure, but also making it so we don't lose productivity, right? Because you can be doing software updates the entire day, and that doesn't really help out, right? So I think what we try to do is say, okay, these Dell solutions that we have, these Latitudes, even these Optiplexes, right? How do we make sure we can remotely update them, be remotely managed, so that there aren't these forced reboots that happen, right? That we make sure that if there's a drive issue, we fix it before it becomes an issue. The other thing that we've really spent some time on is really around how do we make Wi-Fi better, right? What can we do there? And everyone knows about 5G, right? That's a big thing from a phone perspective. But Wi-Fi 4, 5, and now we're at Wi-Fi 6. Said, okay, well, how do we even get more out of Wi-Fi 6? And so Wi-Fi 6E is now really the big standard that we've implemented in all the Dell business solutions. And I go back to that part of like, if you have a commercial solution, that's going to enable you, like our Intel threat detection technology, it's in there. The Intel graphics is in there, right? You think about all the different Dell solutions that are actually Optimizer, it's in there. This is where really thinking, okay, what business solutions am I putting out to my business customers, right? I'm not putting out a consumer, I'm putting a business solution out. And that's going to enable to have better security for those customers that are at the edge.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Let's move to the final section. Evolve your technology for the future of work. First question, how does the Intel vPro platform help partners better manage the continually expanding business endpoints?
Three big ones, Ed. And I think partners say you're doing this right. So one is just hey, if I'm dealing with a lot more customers that are out the edge, or not behind a firewall, what can I use? And everyone remember the acronym KVM, right? Keyboard, video, mouse. So cool, you could actually go through and you could literally be the keyboard for someone remotely. You could take over their machine, right? But the problem was that their software wasn't working. You really couldn't do that. So now if we think of the Latitude solutions out there, Red said, with Latitude got it, Optiplex got it, I can now have a hardware-based KVM that's below the OS. Also, the capability where software patching, I know is a hard thing for a lot of partners to bring it up, and I feel the heartburn right now. They're like, I always tell them to keep their systems on. It's even harder now because I can't physically get to them. But that capability now, if I'm a partner, I can remotely go through and power down that system, power it back up, run a script to install software and turn it off. Capability to do remote power on, power off is really, really, important. And I'd say, the part that we've gotten feedback from partners on is this thing called the cloud. It's a big thing, right? It's like this is like the up and coming. They said, hey, whatever you're doing, Intel and Dell, we got to really make sure you're taking those endpoints and integrating them into a cloud environment. So we said, check mark. We brought this thing called Intel Endpoint Management System. And this is where it's all integrated with those big RMM tools. So think of Datto, think of ConnectWise, Kaseya, Enable, SolarWinds. Now we said, how do we make sure that you can do it all via the cloud and I can manage all that via the cloud? And that has really made it so that now it doesn't matter where the endpoints are, you're going to be able to manage them.
Let's talk security. How does Intel threat detection impact ransomware and crypto mining attacks?
Ed, this is probably one of the hardest topics to just talk about because there's so much, right? I would say first of all, just when you think about an endpoint, that is technically an attack surface. I sound kind of militant, but that attack surface can be the hard drive, it can be the operating system, it can be into some memory in there, right? And the hard part is there's a lot of breaches or attacks that are just, how do you detect it? How do you figure it out? And there's a lot of attacks that happen from those bad actors and hackers are out there that they know, they're like, hey, by the way, I want to make sure that I can take over that system and that they won't know what's actually happening. So our threat detection technology basically starts watching what's actually happening in the system. So when I have my Dell system, I can actually, if I'm a partner and I'm managing it, I can actually see, okay, I'm getting some errors coming back and there's all this flow of stuff coming over. So that part of being able to kind of know the flow of data that's coming across, preventing kind of attacks that happen even on the boot. And I would just say, just this overall increase of protection at the application level. What Microsoft does a great job there, but I think we also want to say at the data level, below the OS, how do we make sure that we can actually lock some of that data down?
Last question. What strategies would you recommend for partners to better protect end users' data and fend off cyber attacks out at the edge?
Ed, there's a lot of things out there that partners are looking at right now on the security side. I first start with just baseline, right? You got to have a business device. So you think of the Dell Latitude, the Dell Optimizers, you got to have a baseline of, hey, this is my offering that I'm going to be able to manage for you, and it's a business device. The secondary thing I'd have, and a lot of partners are moving to this, they're not there yet, but it's you need to have an end-to-end security solution. You got to make sure, obviously software, antivirus, we've known that forever. Yep, that's great. People are now using SIMs and that, which is great. But I think you have to say, okay, making sure I've got hardware that matches up with that. So that vPro technology, Latitude, and Optiplex, link that in, right? So I've got software, I've got hardware. But then I think the part around the services that wrap around it. And people are looking at services saying, hey, I don't really know what to do on the security side. I know my management console and what I do on the management side, but for security, what I do, and I'm like policy management. Easy one, right? You could do on-site assessments, security training, and that's all for those remote people. So that capability, I think, is there. And then, one thing that's just an easy, simple thing that I get talked about almost every day from partners is training the users, right, on the importance of security. Just being real upfront, saying, hey, by the way, you need to make sure we're getting this device because it enables us better security out here. Or, hey, by the way, let me train you on when an email comes across what times. Or, hey, by the way, here's when this application, it's got to run like this. But train them on the importance of security is really, really big.
That's all the time we have for today. Unfortunately, I've always enjoyed talking to Eric. We always enjoy talking about all this technology and the great solutions from Dell and Intel. But you've been watching, ironically enough, Say Hello to the Future of Work, sponsored by Dell Expert Network and Intel. Have a great day, everyone.